And she said to me, what you've been doing is toxic positivity, where you're only focused on the positives. Then when you don't get the positive stuff, you get really knocked back again and again and again, and it feels like you're failing. I actually had a rare disease, and that left me basically bedbound. I then became a slave to my fear, depression, anxiety. Whereas she gave me the example of Michael Phelps. Now what he then did is, instead of just imagining him winning the race, he then imagined his goggles filling up with water, things going wrong throughout the process, but then him still winning the race.
Savills, Monzo, HSBC, Gymshark, Denton's, London Stock Exchange, like the list literally goes on.
And then within 2 weeks, we'd raised the whole next 2 million, but then we oversubscribed on the round to £4.5 million as well. Proved to me that anything is possible when you really put your mind to it, and that self-belief isn't like the thing, it's one of the only things.
Welcome to Gold Standard Time with me, Richard, bringing you stories of innovation, reinvention, and self-development from the Middle East and from right here in the capital of ambition, Dubai. My goal is to inspire and challenge anyone that's dreaming, doing, and pushing for more. So let's get into it. So my guest today is building right at the intersection of ambition and well-being. Joel Gujral is the founder of MyndUp, a platform that's becoming one of the most used employee benefits at top companies across industries like banking and professional services. After raising nearly £5 million and moving to the UAE, he's now shaping how the Middle East approaches performance, mental health, and the future of work. This episode is about resilience, mindset, and why the Gulf may lead the world in well-being. Joel, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I usually find it more polite for the guests to introduce themselves. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you found yourself here.
Yeah, so my journey back dates actually to about 7 to 8 years ago. I was working in a large finance company, coming off the back of a banking and finance degree.
Okay.
So I was doing audit, and I was doing really well there, making lots of friends and doing my audit exams, getting some of the top grades. And just out the blue, suddenly I actually had a rare disease, and that left me basically bedbound for almost 8 months and in and out of hospital. And I didn't really know where to turn to. But then as my mental health started deteriorating more and more, I knew I couldn't ignore it. So I reached out to my manager at the time, who then signposted me to HR, then signposted me to occupational health and insurance. And at the end of it was counselling. But to actually access the counselling, they had to then go through the whole process of deeming you're eligible, and there was a 2-week wait time to actually receive the service and go through the process. So I was basically left quite like stuck, hopeless and alone, and didn't really know what to do. So I paid for counselling privately, thinking that would be the solution, because that's what the company offered. But to my surprise, the counsellor actually said, I don't need counselling. So I was quite shocked by that. And she said, I actually need tools-based therapy, which was CBT therapy, but also mindfulness practices as well. So I actually found 2 people, practitioners, who saved and changed my life at the time. So I then created MyndUp to basically solve the exact problems I had, where companies are dealing with mental health as a clinical only, one-size-fits-all approach with multiple hoops to jump through and long wait times. So I wanted to basically solve that. So I left my job and created what is today MyndUp.
Wow. And so the link between your physical health that wasn't in a good place at the time and your mental health, did you expect that your mental health would take such a toll?
No, because I've only ever had, before that time, I'd have depression or sadness for very short bursts, for hours, and then they'd go, or for a day or so, and then it would go totally. But this was depression that was getting worse and worse and worse in a compounding way. And it started then overtaking and running my life. I then became a slave to my fear, depression, anxiety, all of these things. And I couldn't live a normal life at the time. And that's why it was so difficult.
And why did you think that you could solve the problem yourself? From obviously being in that position, but being an employee at the time, why did you think that from being an employee, you could actually be a business owner and solve this specific issue that you'd had?
Yeah, so I've done 2 businesses before,
Okay.
but they were more the ones that you call like epic failures. So I learned a lot of stuff throughout that process.
Talk to us about those. What businesses were they? Why did you think they didn't work out?
Yeah.
Do you think they could work out in the future?
Yeah, so the first one was a B2B online shift management software, like a SaaS model. And we had a bit of funding for that through our own funds. And then we put it in a pot and tried to sort of scale up the business. we were very close to getting our first paying customer. We got them to have a verbal yes, and we were about to sign things, but then they dropped off. And this was when I was in first year of uni. Okay. So we were very young, learning about business, doing a business degree as well. So that one kind of fell away from the wayside. And then the second business we took all the learnings into, but this time was a B2C business. So it was selling actually fruit tea, 1 box minimum to your door, custom made. And my family actually, they made us work in the family tea business. It was just a very small one, but I noticed a gap in the market. So I wanted to basically create this business to solve that gap. But both of these businesses I wasn't passionate about. But the first one, then the second one did better than the first, and we raised some money with O2. We're on their Startup Accelerator program, had paying customers. But again, I didn't have the passion and drive to get through the lows. And MyndUp was the first ever time that, I hit rock bottom in my life for the first time. I was then saved by a coach who did mindfulness and a CBT therapist. And it was my complete passion, basically, to help others, because I then knew the power of these things. I never had therapy before that. But for basically it to take me from here to there very quickly over several months, I was like, this needs to be done on a global basis. And then because it was the first business I was passionate about, I just gave it my all.
And so was your second business also in university as well?
Second year, in my final year of university, and then post that as well.
So you, I guess, always had planned to be a business owner, an entrepreneur at some point?
Yeah, I've always been doing side hustles on the side of everything. Yeah, trying to, it's always the way I've been brought up, to try and get out of the rat race. Because I think working for someone else was always going to be just a moment in time for me. And seeing my parents, that they worked for BT and GlaxoSmithKline for 25 years. And they've always done side hustles to get out of that. So we've always learned, you've always got to be working hard, hustling to pay your mortgage, to give a good life for your kids and your family when you're older. So we've always been brought up with that kind of values. Yeah,
that's really interesting. I think you seeing that, and I think it's one of those things that goes back down to nurture, right? Because who knows, maybe do you see yourself as a natural entrepreneur, or do you think it's more the fact that those values were instilled by your parents?
I think obviously that was our upbringing, but then it's all about figuring out what's right for you.
Yes.
And, do you want to go on the journey of building like a lifestyle business or $1 billion company, or do you even want to do the entrepreneurship route, or are you happy with the corporate world?
Yeah.
But like my dad, he's always been very big on like thinking big and nothing is impossible. And like, you just got to really go for it in life and you can achieve anything.
Yeah. I think that's really important. So again, you may or may not be a natural business owner, right?
Yeah.
But I think everyone, which I think you're sort of alluding to, everyone will have something that they're passionate about, and so probably could start some sort of a business, right? But then connected with your upbringing, the people you have around you, could be friends, could be family, could be, I don't know, just people that you associated yourself with, could actually be colleagues as well.
Yeah.
You can then have a mindset and the belief that you can get out of the rat race or whatever, right? And so I think, it's one of those things, balancing nature and nurture, whether something is really like a natural side of you or not, it doesn't really matter, because if you're around the right people or you're brought up in the right way, you will always make something out of yourself, your situation, that is so much better and bigger than it would have been had you not had those people, right?
Yeah.
I think that's, I think kudos to your parents for, I think, instilling that way of thinking, because so many people just don't have that, right?
Yeah. And I think it's like self-belief is everything, because even if you haven't had the training, haven't had the business experience, haven't had any of these things, if you really believe something can be possible, you can make it happen. And I think that's the main thing, and gathering that energy, that feeling within inside you, visualizing it daily, meditating on it. And then that is the energy you need to be able to, create more vibrations in the world and be at the right vibration to then actually make things fall into place.
Interesting.
And that's the biggest thing that I've learned.
Interesting. Okay. I think we'll come back to that. So let's talk more about MyndUp. So explain sort of insurance programs, EAP, engagement levels, because I know, for example, MyndUp has been really successful because the engagement with MyndUp has been so much higher than traditional programs. So explain to us how sort of the traditional workplace scheme works and how MyndUp sort of feeds off that, but also takes it a step further.
Yeah, so traditionally, a lot of people think of mental health as mental problems or mental illness. So a lot of the insurance and EAP, they will give you like psychology or therapy, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through, sometimes non-anonymous as well, and not many people know where to access them. And most people aren't coming proactively. They're coming reactively when they're in crisis or have a big issue. And that's been the big issue. That's been the big problem. So then suddenly you're servicing 3% of your workforce are generally in crisis, and you're not servicing the other 97%. And that's why engagement has been quite woeful with those things. And generally the help you're getting is just to get you back to stability, but not anything to do with any high performance or pushing you further up.
Basically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've basically flipped it all on its head, where we don't just offer therapy and counseling and psychology, we also offer mindfulness practitioners and coaches as well. And we really promote that you can see these people at any point in your life, whether you're thriving or whether you're in crisis or somewhere in between. And, you know, I give the example of I've had some of my best sessions ever, coaching or therapy, not just when I'm in crisis, but when I'm at the top of my game, to keep me there and give me good maintenance so I don't fall back. Or even as I'm falling back, to have the therapy or have psychology or have coaching to then maintain me back to where I was before. So that's the most important thing.
Okay.
And why engagement is so big, because suddenly we've rebranded mental health as not being mental problems anymore. And you can use it at any point in your life.
Okay. No, thank you for that. So I know some of your big name clients you've worked with in the past: Savills, Monzo, HSBC, Gymshark, Denton's, London Stock Exchange, British Academy, Prince's Trust, like the list literally goes on. At some of these corporations, the benefit is literally like the most used one, right? Which is an amazing, I think, accomplishment on your part and to your team as well. Why do you think people feel so comfortable using MyndUp versus other systems?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. Firstly, the way we launched the service is really to like change the stigma organization wide, and we launched with the exec team. So there was one global investment bank that launched with us, and we actually had the COO and founding partner. He just so happened to have used the service, and he actually direct messaged me and said, "It's changed my life. It's actually changed one of my family members' lives. I'm happy to share my story with you." So then we came on an all-staff webinar, and before that webinar, there was really woeful uptake and low uptake of their AXA insurance in the sort of low percentages, single percentages. And no one was really using it apart from crisis-only support. And they had the sort of mindset that, you know, the people on the floor, on the trading floor, they're too busy. No one's going to really interact with mental health services. But then we actually launched the pilot, and this CEO and founding partner came on and shared his story of mental health, and pre using MyndUp, but also during using it as well. And then also I shared my story, and then also shared tools and techniques that the Navy SEALs use, top Olympic athletes as well, to show, you know, we're not just crisis talk, we're also talking about world champions, what they do. And it inspired so many people that after that webinar, the week after, the next 7 days, we had 45% of bookings coming from director and managing director level.
Wow.
And it was the first time in the history of the company they've ever had that, ever.
That's amazing. That's amazing. There is often a stigma in the corporate world, particularly within banking, regarding mental health and regarding performance and, you know, whether you can sort of hack the pressure. And I think most people can, right? But I think it's not having the tools at times, right? The market, clients may not be doing what you want them to do, may not be buying, the market may not be where it needs to be. Most people, I think, can actually handle some of those ups and downs, but for whatever reason, just the ongoing level of stress means that, and I've seen it with many colleagues in the past, for example, just aren't able for whatever reason to, at one point or another, cope with what's happening on a specific day, right?
Yeah.
And that's really it. Sometimes it's just the one day that sort of tips you over the edge. But having the tools, as you've just said, really enables you to not just cope, but to thrive and actually be high performance, which I think is really important. I also think it's really important to share stories, right? And stories that are shared by people that you trust, but also respect. So you mentioned this founding partner that was able to share his story, and that makes it okay for others to sort of put their hand up and say, you know, I've had this as well, or I've experienced this difficult situation as well, and also come out and be able to put their hand up and use the service. So I think that's really, really powerful. And I think the fact that he was able to also use his position of influence within the firm to not promote mental health, but to make it okay to ask for help, I think is also really, really powerful. What brought you to the UAE? Why did you choose this region as a base?
So I've been coming out for the last 4 years, and I've been coming out for like 1 or 2 months at a time to try it, because I've always wanted to live somewhere else other than the UK.
Okay, why is that?
I think as I've traveled the world, I've seen like the opportunity, and that just from where you grow up doesn't need to be the place you end up as well. And I've seen other communities where there's a lot of entrepreneur, inspiring mindsets and stuff, and beauty of nature or the ocean and stuff. And I've always thought the world is big enough, and if I find anywhere I like, I'd like to explore living there. So I've always kind of been on the lookout and open-minded. And when I came to the UAE, the lifestyle, the sun, I was living like now, for instance, my garden is the beach. It's just amazing for, mindfulness, meditation. I do a lot nearly every day. And you just can't beat that kind of lifestyle. And then also I'd say, in terms of mental health, it's probably tracking between 5 to 7 years behind the UK. But what's really inspiring is that the UAE now want to become the world leader in wellbeing, and they've actually put quality of life in their 2031 strategy. And they've put now over 100 million AD into a mental health framework as well. And I'm seeing companies now adopt a lot of mental health services and wellbeing services and coaching as well. So I can see the opportunity here, and it's still early, which is very exciting, actually coming here. And it just so happened that although we're a UK-based business, because we're virtual in nature, we actually started rolling out globally with a lot of clients. And even before I came to the UAE, was servicing over 15,000 employees. So then it started to become apparent that this is actually a region that has a lot of legs as well. But I think the other thing is, the entrepreneurship and mindset of people, communities here is brilliant. Whenever you meet anyone, they always want to help you. Who can they introduce you to? And hearing how developed some of their business are, it's just really inspiring for you to hear, because it really shows like anything is possible, and the lifestyle you can live and the life you can live as well and provide.
No, I think that's, thank you for sharing that. Firstly, on the point of the UAE, the well-being and lifestyle vision that the country has it's one of those things that just really reminds you how much the country cares about the citizens and also the residents, right? Whether you're an expat or you have been born and raised here and you're a citizen of the country, there are always so many initiatives by His Royal Highness, the Sheikh, and by other government officials and departments to make living here an even better experience. And the fact that even filters down into what we're speaking about today in terms of well-being is, I think, just, so inspirational. And it really makes you think that, it's not that hard for a country or a government to really be very granular in how it takes care of its residents, right? It's just, it takes focus, it takes, an objective, it takes investment, as you've just mentioned, but over time, you can really make that place, the best place to live and a much better place to live. What's the mental health framework in the UAE? How does that align with your vision?
So it just shows that the investment is starting to come into that space, because previously when I was coming in 2021 or 2022 and even 23, when you spoke about mental health, it wasn't well accepted and it wasn't really spoken about. But now we've come, mental health has evolved now into proactivity, into wellness, into well-being, into coaching, and it's becoming a lot more accepted. So just seeing this investment of the 2031 strategy or the mental health framework coming out is brilliant. And then we're starting to see actually local projects happening, which we weren't before. It was all coming from like, if there was a big corporate, it was coming from head office, say in the UK or in the US, and then rolling it out. Whereas now we're seeing, for instance, like HSBC doing local initiatives, which we weren't before, which is very exciting, because it means that things are happening here.
Okay. No, that's actually really, really powerful. And you mentioned before about mental health almost being sort of rebranded in this region as well-being. What are the differences? Or are they the same? Do the words really matter to you? And also, do you think it's important for mental health to be rebranded? Or is the way that it's looked at in the West actually better than here?
Yeah, so the term mental health is quite well accepted in Europe and in the US as well. What I found in the UAE, the words that are more accepted is well-being and coaching. Mental health, people are still viewing it here as mental illness.
Okay.
So there is still a lot of stigma there, which does show where the market is in terms of compared to the UK and Europe itself and the US as well. So we actually brand a lot of our assets here as well-being and coaching, and people get it a lot more, and they can then understand the proactive side that we're talking about when we are talking about those words.
Well-being and mental health, we've spoken about the perspective in the UAE, but you operate, MyndUp operates in many countries around the world, many continents. Can you give us a bit of a flavor of different regions and different countries, and maybe some of the instances that you're seeing occur more in some countries than others, what some countries really excel at and maybe don't do too well at? Like, what are some of the nuances that you're seeing internationally?
Yes, good question. So in terms of stigma, that there is still a high stigma in the Middle East region, but also in Asia as well, actually. So a lot of people don't actively or openly talk about mental health there. Whereas if you look at Australia, Europe, or the US, it's a different story. Mental health, well-being, coaching is widely accepted. Even in Europe, 30% of our bookings come from coaching, for instance. So people are proactively looking at this kind of stuff. And when we say to senior leaders in Europe or US, would you come on an all-staff webinar and share your story? It's, yes, of course, I'll do it, you know. They're used to it, you know, they want to promote it. Whereas if we talk to leaders in Asia or the Middle East, it's a bit more of a taboo topic. We have to meet the leaders, sort of warm them up, and sometimes they're not comfortable sharing too much. Then we only let them then share what they are. But we are finding they're a lot more open in Europe and US. But there is becoming a shift. There is, because now we are seeing leaders in Asia talking more about it and even be willing to come on a webinar with us or in-person event, which is a great sign, really.
Okay, well, thank you. So MyndUp offers coaches, therapists, psychologists, and I'm missing one. Counselors. What is the difference between those roles, and how do you guide people to the right one?
Yeah, so what we do is people go on the platform and they're able to have the freedom of choice to choose who's right for them, and they can filter down by almost 100 different specialisms. You know, bullying in the workplace, communication skills, bereavement, a whole host of things, or language. And then how it always differs is a great question. It's probably the most commonly I'm asked. So if you look at therapy and counselling, that's generally focused on the past. About 70 to 80% on the past and 20 to 30% on the future. Counselling is usually like unburdening yourself, getting things off your chest, and the counsellor will listen a lot. Then as you move into therapy, you're getting more into tools and techniques as well. So you might have heard of CBT therapy or cognitive behavioural therapy. And that does, you know, you still talk in those sessions, but equally that moves into tools and techniques to, you know, move you forward.
What sort of things are contained within CBT therapy? What sort of tools are we talking about?
Some mindfulness tools in terms of like bringing you to the present, things like journaling or expressive writing, where you're just getting everything out and you're trying to release certain traumas or certain blocked pathways within you. So it can range from a whole host of things. And then you have mindfulness in the middle. And mindfulness is all about forgetting about the past worry, forgetting about the hypothetical future worry that you have, and living in the here and now. So being present, living in the present moment and enjoying what you have. And then you have coaching, which is about 80% focused on the future and 20% focused on the past. And it's all about moving you from A to B with certain milestones and someone holding you accountable for those things as well.
Okay, that's fine. And what was the other one? Psychologist?
Psychologist, yeah. So that tips into basically the past stuff where you have counselling and therapy. And that focuses a lot on going back to childhood or back to your traumas and releasing those as well.
Okay, nice. You mentioned mindfulness, trying to enjoy the present moment.
Yeah.
How can that be done if the present moment is not an enjoyable one? How are people guided to do that?
Yeah, so it's all about like stopping suffering. So even if you have like say chronic pain or an illness, right? The whole point of mindfulness is to detach from that and not label it, So you're actually able to enjoy the present without suffering. And even though that pain or anything is going on, you can still be present in the moment and watch TV or enjoy certain times, even though that is happening. And that's the biggest thing, because what happens is most people will start to worry about the hospital appointment that is coming up, or they'll start thinking that I'm going to have this forever, and their mind go out of control. So even Buddhism and spirituality teaches you to detach from that and just be present in the moment. And when a thought comes up, label that thought and get back to the breath and just get back to present. And that will stop any suffering that is happening in the moment.
Interesting. Okay. So MyndUp has what's been termed like a Netflix of well-being. Tell us what's in that. How does it work? What sort of content is housed within this system?
Yes, that's a sort of secondary product we offer as well outside of the one-to-one sessions. And on that, we have like webinars, we have videos from our practitioners on stress, burnout, resilience, and we have a whole bunch of stuff pre-recorded. But we also have fresh content that comes out that follows the Wellbeing calendar. So we'll follow like World Suicide Prevention Day, Stress Awareness Week, or Mental Health Awareness Month and Week as well. And through all of these things, we'll have readable content, watchable content, as well as live content. We're able to help companies service their diverse range of employees, those that help work best with visual, those that work best with reading, or those that work best with live content, interactive as well. So we find it's quite important, like there is no one size fits all. So even when it comes to content, you need a diverse range so you can service your diverse range of employees as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think what you guys offer, I haven't used it personally myself, but from our conversations and from my research, it's no wonder that the take up is just so wide. One of the things I think you mentioned previously was, I think like stage of life care or something like that. So for example, somebody that's about to go off on maternity leave, or somebody that's just been promoted, or somebody, like different things that you may come up against in life. There is like a framework and an approach that you can take to it that will, I guess, increase your chances of success in that area. And so what MyndUp offers just seems so applicable to so many people in so many different life stages that, it's just no wonder that so many people are able to find something that applies to them and where they're at. It's also kind of surprising that something like this hasn't been offered or sort of available in the past, because it just seems like it makes sense, which I guess the best business ideas do seem like, this does make sense, right? Yeah. Okay, so you've spoken previously about resetting the nervous system. And it's something that you hear a lot of people talk about, their nervous system is inflamed, or my nervous system right now can't handle this. It's just something that I think is obviously a technical term and a technical area to speak about, but people, I think, at the moment speak about it very generally. What does it mean to reset your nervous system? You've spoken about sort of removing fear, stress, and anxiety from the driving seat. What does that mean to you?
Yes, you have two parts of your nervous system. You have your parasympathetic part and your sympathetic part.
Okay.
And your sympathetic part is more your fight or flight. So when it gets dialed up, if it's stressful work or you're in the gym or whatever, it's good to have it dialed up at certain times, but not sustained, because sustained sympathetic nervous system can cause undue stress. And if that undue stress is unmanaged, you then get burnout.
When you say sustained, what sort of time period are we talking about? Hours or days or?
It can be, yeah. So if your sympathetic nervous system is on most of the time, then even over several hours or most of the day, then you're going to start feeling levels of conscious stress, but also unconscious levels of stress as well. Stress you don't even know you're feeling. And when that then starts to maintain for several days and weeks, you can then start getting like chronic symptoms in your body, like IBS, headaches, some people suffer of, and even like pain in your knees or your joints and other things. And they do say now, like the mind-body interaction is one of the biggest causes of like chronic symptoms, even when there's no physical cause of these things. And it's something that happened with my rare disease as well, which was an IBS sort of condition. And they've now confirmed that the second part of my IBS condition is a neurological cause from the gut-brain axis. So a lot of the work I'm doing is now to access the second part of the nervous system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. So this is your part of your nervous system that is your rest and digest state. So when you've activated this, which can be stimulated by your vagus nerve, you might have heard as well.
And what's a vagus nerve?
It connects your brain to all different parts of your body.
Okay.
And that's when you start feeling calm and relaxed. So a lot of the interventions you see, like hypnotherapy, like even therapy, like CBT as well, or mindfulness, is to activate your parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
So then you're more grounded and you're more in a calm state.
How much of this is like accepted science, and at what points does it veer to maybe like spirituality or other areas that are maybe more difficult to prove?
Yeah, so previously it was more anecdotal, but now there's a lot of clinical research. So there's big research, and John Sarno, one of the medical doctors, he was actually one of the pioneers that boosted this activity several years ago. And now there's clinical trials on back pain, for instance, taking people who have surgery versus psychological interventions. And actually, people are 50% more likely to recover from long-term chronic pain with psychological intervention after, say, a surgery than repeatable surgeries. So it's very interesting now. We're actually seeing the real data. And we're even seeing like people like Vince Vaughn and other celebrities now, actors and others, who have actually come out and said they've had chronic back pain for several years. They then went through surgery and MRIs and all this thing, and no doctor could figure it out. They then went down the psychological route, and now they're running marathons again, something that the doctors never thought they could. So it's brilliant. We're now seeing, alternative medicine, longevity type medicine come out now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that I think if you are looking at like health from a holistic perspective, you can't just look at, how do I feel in my body?
Yeah.
Does it hurt or does it not hurt? You have to look at what the causes of those aches and pains and other issues have been, and then also how to then fix it from that perspective, not just with medication or surgery or whatever. And I think the more research, as you said, that comes out that shows that mind-body connection, the better chances people have to actually have a, as you said, longer run or sort of longevity-based recovery, and actually someone really being better and not just feeling better. That makes sense. What were you going to say?
And I was going to say, it's not saying you never go down the medical route, but what happens is sometimes you go down the medical route and you get stuck in cycles, and then you're left with, even when you've had surgery or post-surgery, lots of problems or chronic pain. And generally those times, there's a neuropathic pathway going on where it's just stuck in motion, like happened with my rare disease that we're now trying to turn off. And once the medical route has fixed the cause, then you might have to go onto the mainly neurological route.
Okay. So we're sitting here in Dubai, which is the capital of ambition, as I like to say. As you've mentioned, people here are very driven, hungry to succeed and really want to do well. It's also balanced by people being, very accepting, very open, very helpful, and it's just a great melting pot of people that I think are very, very likely to be successful in some way, shape, or form, and it's a good place to be. What are one or two things that an ambitious person here in Dubai or anywhere else in the world do to calm or reset their nervous system in a couple of minutes or a couple of hours, when they are about to pitch to an investor or when they are having issues with a product release, as many people here do? What are some of the things and techniques that you can maybe teach now that can help somebody to reset?
It's a great question, and there's no right or wrong for anyone. You've got to try what's right for you. But some of the techniques that have worked for me have been things like ice baths are brilliant to sort of get that parasympathetic nervous system after a while dialed in. Also, box breathing is brilliant. So it's a breathing technique used by Olympic athletes and even the Navy SEALs. And what it does is after a few minutes, it stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system. So you basically breathe in for 4 seconds, you then hold for 4 seconds, you then breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds, and you cycle that round for several minutes with your eyes open or closed. And you basically will start to feel physically more calm and relaxed, but also mentally more calm and relaxed as well.
Why do those two things work? Why does an ice bath work and why does box breathing work?
Well, the thing is, they work for me. They do work for other people. But the thing with those things is, like, if we take box breathing, it's like scientifically proven that can stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. So it's widely now accepted even with science. And that's why a lot of people do it. But for some people, they might, do it and it might only stimulate it a little bit.
Right.
And they might, they might do a box breathing, but then they might also need a meditation or a visualization or an ice bath as well. So it all depends on the individual and what you're trying to achieve. If you're on the side of a tennis pitch at the US Open, you might do box breathing mixed with visualization as well, because you might need self-belief in there. So sometimes you've got to mix in a few techniques.
And what does an ice bath do to the body that resets the parasympathetic nervous system?
Yeah, so one of the main things is, firstly, your levels of cortisol stress go up and your body and mind is fighting for you to get out, right? But then it's the mental clarity and resilience. It's like meditation, right? When you close your eyes, you're in a meditation or you're in an ice bath, you're like, do I open my eyes? I need to get out of this. And it's basically saying, no, I'm going to stay here. Let's focus on the breath. And as you start focusing on your breath, then it starts stimulating your vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system and starts dialing down your stress response. And as you start doing that for longer and longer periods, so say 5 minutes in the ice bath for me is optimal, I start getting the same mental clarity as doing a 10-minute meditation. So it's all about that. You're basically resisting and resilience mindset to calm everything down.
Okay, no, that makes sense. It was actually what I had thought to an extent, that maybe it's just the hardness of the challenge and being able to push through that helps you in that situation. But I guess you've sort of broken it down in a more structured and experienced way. So no, thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk about visualization. What are some of the ways that people get that wrong, particularly as it pertains to toxic positivity?
Yeah, so I've always grown up in a household where I was always taught, just visualize the success, visualize the positivity, just be so positive all the time. And actually, as I was growing up, I actually went to golf school to train to be a professional golfer. And I was doing all these techniques, but I went for a really rough patch and I was not shooting good rounds, and it got to me really badly, actually. And I was talking to my dad about it. I was saying, I'm doing everything I can, but I'm not reaching scratch level and I'm shooting really bad rounds. Why is that? Is this work not working? And he couldn't really explain it. And it wasn't until a few years later, actually, when I then met another coach who was then coaching me for almost 2 years. And she actually coaches some of the top athletes and Olympic professionals as well as CEOs around the world. And she said to me, what you've been doing is toxic positivity, where you're only focused on the positives. Then when you don't get the positive stuff, you get really knocked back again and again and again, and it feels like you're failing. Whereas she gave me the example of Michael Phelps. Now, what he then did is, instead of just imagining him winning the race, he then imagined his goggles filling up with water, things going wrong throughout the process, but then him still winning the race and getting through those hard times. And then when those things happened, his goggles filled up. It wasn't a big knockback or surprise because he knew he could get through them. And that story and that level of visualization I then started practicing was a thing that was life-changing for me. Because then suddenly when I got on stage, I wasn't worried about forgetting my words, because I knew even if I forgot them, I'd still be able to deliver a fantastic speech by the end of it.
Okay. It's I have actually heard that Michael Phelps story before. And as you said, there was a time where everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. But it was the fact that he'd almost been there before.
Yeah.
And so he just did what he always did and what he had practiced, and ended up still obviously being the amazing Olympian that we know him to be.
Yeah. But the main thing is, and this is what I learned as well through all of this work, is that when you physically rehearse something, you can only do it a finite amount of times. When you then rehearse your mindset, you can do that an infinite amount of times. You can be in your bedroom, you can be laying down, you can be anywhere you can, and you can just be rehearsing it, even on your desk. So that was the most powerful thing for me, is the amount of repetition and reps you can put into that to feel that muscle memory.
And what would you say to people that sort of think that if you're allowing the negative thoughts in alongside the positive ones, that can also lead you down the wrong path as well? Because how much negativity, if you want to call it that, how many So take Michael Phelps. How many things going wrong? I'd say that. How many things going wrong should you factor into an exercise like this?
Yeah, so good question. So it's not just about focusing on the negative. It's about focusing on the negative, but you still having success in some way. You know, so you're turning that negative around into a positive.
Okay.
So you're not afraid then. A lot of people get afraid and fear dials up when they think about the negative, but it's all about leaning into it.
Yeah.
And what would you do to get through it?
Yeah.
And then it trains your body and mind to have the self-belief to say, I can do it no matter what is thrown at me.
Yeah. You know, it's really, it's actually really powerful. I think that what you're saying is really, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, like a missing link right, between where they are and where they want to be, because it's the fear element.
Yeah.
If you have conquered a fear in your mind before you get to it, and you know that it doesn't matter if this thing happens, I've been here before, I've faced you before, and I've actually like overcome, right? It's interesting talking about sort of meditation, and it's interesting talking about meditation and visualization. I'm a believer, I'm in Jesus, follower of Christ. And so what we're often taught is that you believe and you have faith based on what the Bible says, right? And that's really powerful. But I do think in terms of what you're saying, having the understanding that, you know, God's word, the Bible, is still true and is still going to happen despite, you know, a negative occurrence that could come up. Because the issue is you believe something, which is all fine, until something opposite to what you believe happens, and then you're thrown off. And that's the fear that you're talking about, right? And so it's so interesting because, again, having the belief and being confident enough to say that this is still going to happen, even if X, Y, Z happens, is what removes the fear. And the fear is a thing that often can sort of scupper the plans and ruin everything in the first place. So no, I think that makes actually a lot of sense. So you raised almost £5 million in Series A. What did that moment represent for you on a personal level?
Yeah, so it was a very difficult task, and a lot of the stuff we've spoken about in terms of self-belief, confidence, fear was all kicking in, because we were raising at a time where the market had been very buoyant, and valuations were high and things like that, but also we were sort of coming away from the peak as well. And a lot of people said, because we were a non-profitable business at the time, we couldn't get it done. And they did also say like parts of the business aren't scalable and all these kind of things. But I truly believed that we could, because I knew we had a really good business, and it was something I was so passionate about sharing globally and helping so many people around the world. So I was going to get it done, and I knew I was. And we got halfway through the raise, and we raised just over 2 million. And I was going to close the round there because it was proving really difficult. I couldn't get many more leads. It was a lot of rejection coming in.
And what was the timeline for this raise?
It was about 8 months in total. Yeah. And then some prep time just before that. So almost a year. And halfway through, we got to just under 2 million, then just over halfway through to just over 2. And then I said to the lead investors, I said, I'm actually going to close the round here. And they said, no, you're not. We're not going to transfer the money unless you raise the full amount, because otherwise you're not validating this round. And I was like, you know, after several back and forward, I knew they wouldn't budge. So then I had to basically rewire my mindset, rewire my self-belief through my meditations, visualizations, coaching, self-work to make sure I could get it done. And when I then reset, I went at it so hard. And then within 2 weeks, we'd raised the whole next 2 million, but then we oversubscribed on the round to £4.5 million as well. And I remember the level of self-belief and confidence I had to have to get that done. But it then proved to me that anything is possible when you really put your mind to it. And that self-belief isn't like the thing, it's one of the only things, because then it pushes everything else into place and you can navigate challenges or any hard times even more.
And just illustrate that moment for us. What were you thinking about yourself, about the situation? Like, where were you at during like that period? If you were to sort of go back there, you obviously came out of it with like super level of confidence and everything. Like, what was that Joel like on that day or sort of during those few weeks?
Yeah, so I went from obviously a really thriving Joel at the beginning to in the middle actually feeling really defeated and like I failed and I couldn't get this done. And then by the end of it, I felt really proud and humbled to say I did, because I did it not just for myself, for my team, to help others around the world, for all of the clients that we're helping as well, and to basically grow it on a large scale to create a big impact. So it was like an all-round level of sort of being really proud, because I knew that it wasn't just a personal achievement, but also like a global achievement as well.
Yeah. And what were you telling yourself during that time? What were you visualizing? What were you doing to bring yourself from sort of that middle low point to the person that was able to pull that off?
Yeah, so it was basically like visualizing the journey, but not just visualizing the end point, visualizing all of the different highs and lows. And basically one of the big things is I started to take the feedback personally. So when there was one US call and they just stopped the call midway through and then just started really hitting us with all this negativity and stuff. And I took it really personally, and that happened quite a few times, hundreds of rejections on these calls. And I had to rewire that, and I had to basically visualize that we were still going to have those, but not to take it personally and zoom out and not get in the weeds and take the learnings that I needed to.
And what were you basing that on? The fact that this is still going to turn out well, this is still going to be successful. Like what were you basing that on?
Yeah, basically basing it on that although we're going to have all these ups and downs and knockbacks, we're still going to get through and we're still going to get it done. And this business is still going to be one of the largest mental health businesses in the world. And that level of self-belief got us through those lows, and I think it's natural for anyone or any person with that level of rejection over so much time to have those lows. And I'm grateful to have the low, because then it taught me how to get out of it and how to train that muscle memory, and the highs would never be as high if you don't have those lows as well.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for like the God, universe, whatever you believe in, that it was able to bring me that, to give me those lessons.
Okay. I know that you have some interesting views on fundraising, bootstrapping. There are many founders that believe, you have to wait a long time before you go for a fundraise. There are other founders that believe, everything should be done with your own money until it's validated, and then you go from there. What's your viewpoint on that? Where do you stand on that debate?
Yeah, so my first two businesses, we wasted a lot of money trying to find product market fit, any sort of product market fit or sales. With MyndUp, I said to myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the complete opposite and basically use this lean startup methodology where I built everything in wireframes and coded everything myself using non-code tools and plugging them together. And I then managed to get my first client with a deck, a website, and a demonstration that I'd built. And I only spent £105. And with just me, a laptop, and a freelancer at 10 hours a week, I managed to get the business to almost 100,000 in annual recurring revenue before we raised a penny. And it was only £105 that went in. And then when we started raising money, we raised small amounts, and then we doubled revenue in each raise.
Wow.
So every 6 to 8 months, we were doubling revenue, but only raising, our first round was 50K. Then our next round was 150K, then 300K, and then 4.5 million. So, but it was proving and validating at every step of the way. Rather than my last business, we raised £10,000 with O2, we wasted all of it, and we were wasting so much money trying to find product market fit, and it was no good. It wasn't the right way to do it.
Okay. And so, in short, what would be your message to a founder on how to succeed on the sort of bootstrapping fundraising journey? When are they ready to fundraise? When should they stop bootstrapping and look for outside money and other people's money? Like, what would be your message to those people?
My main thing is that there's a way to do everything. So get out there, figure out a way to just drive some revenue. Once you've proven a little bit of traction, even a letter of intent, or a signed contract, you can then raise money off the back of that. And a great example is I'm currently chairman of an AI company, and the founder is a young guy. He's 23 years old, and he was listening to all of that, and he managed to get his first client on board, and then he raised his first round of investment, and he raised his second round of investment once he'd bootstrapped all that money and got to almost 500,000 in ARR. So it just shows you, and he's non-technical and he was able to do it. He brought in a technical co-founder a bit later on. But it just shows you anything is possible. And he was doing exactly the same as me, building in his bedroom, wireframes, £20 website, this and that, and just figuring out what needs to be done to get that first client and get that validation to prove the market wants your product or service.
Yeah. Okay. That's, I love it because it's a very ambitious way to build, but it's also a careful way to do it as well. It's not sort of going hell for leather and saying, you know, this is going to work and it doesn't really matter. Which one of the reasons I think what you're saying during the course of this interview makes sense is because there's a real balance between confidence, self-belief, but also a measured approach. Looking at the tools that can be helpful, but then also looking at what works for you. And you sort of presented a very balanced view in, you know, how to make many of these things work, right? And how to actually make progress. I think from an investing perspective, or from a founder's perspective, it's so important to have people around you that can give you these lessons. Now, here in Dubai, you obviously have a lot of those sorts of people. What have you seen in terms of differences and similarities in the founders community here and in the UK?
Yeah, I'd say you get a lot of people who are already up and running here or late stage. Whereas in the UK, there's a lot of earlier founders, I find, especially in the communities, people at idea stage. But I even find over here, people are bootstrapping a lot of businesses while they're working a full-time job. And it's really inspiring because some of my friends are sort of working full-time jobs, bootstrapped 4 or 5 businesses. Some of them are doing 6-figure revenues monthly. And it's just, it really is like an incredible thing to hear. And every person I speak to in the UAE is doing some kind of business or some kind of idea or some kind of something. Whereas in the UK, you're more of a minority in that sense.
And so how has being around those sorts of founders over here changed the way that you run your business?
Well, I think it's a level of energy and vibration that they go off. So when we meet each other, the energy is so high. There's so much vibration there. Straight after we've met, we'll be texting each other saying, God, I've just locked in for like 2-3 hours now. So inspired by what you said. I just learned so many things. And it's just such a shared way of learning because everyone's trying to help each other. No one's kind of against each other. And everyone is looking to help, but also inspiring others. And I think that's the main thing because you're learning through your just normal conversations here.
Okay. And what some of the things that surprised you about the Middle East when you moved over here?
I'd probably say like we said, the level of entrepreneurship here and the amount of people that are doing businesses left, right and center. I'd probably say the other thing is the sales cycles over here. I always heard they were longer in terms of sales cycles, but we're getting to procurement stage really quickly, even with government entities. So I was really surprised by that because in the UK, it can take like 2 to 3 months to even go through the procurement process with 6 to 18 months before that. Whereas here, I find things are a lot more dynamic and fast moving. And if someone wants to do something, they can sign it off really quickly. But it's of the opposite what I heard when I came out here. So that was very interesting to me.
So Joel, as we come to the end, for ambitious business owners, entrepreneurs, but also people in their careers as well, that feel stressed out and anxious about the future, about what they currently have going on, what's the one message that you would leave them with about what to do about their current situation?
Yeah, the main thing is that they're currently thinking about the hypothetical future, stuff that hasn't even happened yet, and their mind's going out of control. Or they're thinking of like past trauma or something that's happened. So self-belief is one of the biggest things that they can work on. And you can do that with a coach. You can even do that. I've actually worked a lot with my therapist with that, trying to unlock a lot of the things that are causing that worry, overthinking, that fear overriding as well. And when you start working on that self-belief, you'll be able to basically get through those thoughts or emotions coming in a lot easier because you know you're going to be able to get through and you just back and trust yourself a lot more. So that level of self-belief has been probably one of the biggest lessons for me.
Why does coaching self-belief, confidence training, those sorts of things, why do they not work for some people? What are the main blockers that just either take a really long time before somebody gets a positive change, or it just doesn't seem to have like material impact on someone's life?
So there's always a way to figure it out. It could be that they're working on the wrong thing. I actually did this for several years. So when fear was overriding me, my self-confidence, self-belief was coming down, I was doing a lot of forward-looking work, no backward-looking work, because I thought, I don't have any traumas, I don't have anything. And what was happening is it was like a spring. The fear, the self-belief was getting really good, but then springing back. And it kept springing back. And I kept doing meditations every day, visualizations. And it was almost like a losing battle. It's like I was going 3 steps uphill and then 4 steps back. And it was then when I then tackled something differently, which was actually, I then started seeing an American psychologist and a UK therapist to start releasing blocked traumas and blocked energy that was at the root of the fear and at the root of the low self-confidence. And then things started to unwind, mixing that then with the forward-looking work after that past work, then it was a massive acceleration for me. So I was focused on the wrong things and I was going around in circles again and again, like a lot of people would.
So Joel, what is your perspective on gratitude? I know the last time we spoke, you mentioned a difficult relationship that you'd been in the past, and a discussion that you were in with some of your friends, and you being able to look at that situation and not necessarily say that, I never wish, I wish I never met that person, or I wish that never happened. What is your perspective looking back on negative things that have happened, and why are you able to take a grateful approach towards them?
Yeah, so even if you take that relationship or the rare disease, that overtook my life, I'm very grateful to the universe to give me those things because, without them, I wouldn't be sitting here with MyndUp, for instance, if I didn't have the rare disease, or I wouldn't have had the personal growth I would have had if I didn't have that relationship. So all of these things happen to you so that you can actually learn something from them and actually learn something not just to help yourself, but others in the world as well. And I think that's been the most important thing for me, is that everything happens for a reason and you've just got to figure out what it is and take the learnings of it, but then actually focus it on the future and what you're going to learn from it and how you're going to change your life fundamentally going forward.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And it's something that's been spoken about recently at my church in terms of just being grateful to God for everything, right?
Yeah.
Number one, something could have happened that was really terrible, but it could have been worse. That's one way to look at it. But also look at who you became and what you learned because of what happened, right? And the truth of the matter is, people often say that, God doesn't waste anything. All of the negative experiences and positive experiences that you've had can, if you allow them, they can all be building blocks to a much better future. And I think that is then when you then begin to look forward, because you can then see a bit more holistically and you can see sort of things coming together, and you don't then see the past as something that is completely wasted and something that doesn't mean anything, because it is meaningful, right? And so is the present, and so is the future. But as you've said previously in this interview, you can only really appreciate the present if you have a correct perspective of the past and the future, right? Yeah,
exactly that.
Okay. And so, final question. MyndUp, you've been here in the UAE for about 10 months or so, if I'm correct. That was a big step for yourself, big step for the business. What's next for MyndUp? What's next for you?
Yeah, so interestingly, we're growing in the UAE region now, which is brilliant, and the Middle East, but surprisingly also in Australia as well.
Okay.
And also several parts in Asia like Singapore. So what was once sort of a UK business has now expanded to 50 countries. And now we're gaining not just sort of spotted areas in each of them, now much bigger expansion actually, which is really interesting. So we really see ourselves as the one global platform end to end for mental health. So you can have a global business with one platform globally giving equality of benefits for the diverse range of global employee population. And I think that's most powerful because a lot of companies have one benefit in India, one benefit in Europe, one in US, and there's no equality and diversity at that range. So we want to be that one single provider globally, like for our clients.
Cool. Joel Gujral, thank you so much for coming on today. I think your mission and what MyndUp is doing, in this region, but around the world, is so powerful and so impactful. I think in a region like this that is moving at just breakneck speed, organizations like yours allow people to be as ambitious and as forward-thinking as they can be, but in a way that is still not damaging to them and to the society. So thank you very much, and I hope we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.